Hi, it's Dr. Cairns. Welcome to week 3 of labor law and negotiations. And I enjoyed your discussion this week on the National Labor Relations Act. And it was interesting to see Glenn's perspective it was a lot to read. And it seemingly is. However, the substance or the things that you really focus on are obviously the employer and the union unfair labor practices and collective bargaining and what's included, what's not included. And also, I really enjoyed looking at your modern day examples of things that were taking place. And I want to make a couple comments on those in this particular area. And one of those was an interaction a question really that Lisa posed to Crystal, talking about could a union cause a problem for employers, or the fact that the union employees were represented. Could that pose ultimately a problem for employers? And essentially, there's probably a couple different aspects to think about. And then actually, I'll probably use that in terms of looking at the example of Trader Joe's that Judy brought up, where her dad is celebrating 50 years. That's amazing. I didn't even realize Trader Joe's has been around for 50 years. Just as a side note, there's a company that also has been in Europe and in Chicago area and other areas that are coming to Southern California that I shopped at when I was living in Ireland and teaching. And it was a company called Aldix that was one that considered itself the Trader Joe's of Europe, but actually a German-owned company, and they've been in the United States in the mid western regions and a little bit on the East Coast, and they're now expanding, and they'll be a competitor to Trader Joe's. But it was also interesting to note, because a few years back, you might recall, there was a boycott and a strike that was going on with Kroger that represented Vons and Ralph's and Albertsons, and stores like Trader Joe's. They were able to stay in business, and Whole Foods, because they weren't unionized, and so people were able to go to those stores. So in some ways, the employers weren't impacted per se. And then also Kroger hired replacement workers, or also had their management fill in, and all you had to do was cross the picket line. But there are things that companies can be affected by employers' boycotts or strikes or walkouts. There was a strike of bakers for Hostess Company Bakery. Also in Southern California, they made Twinkies, if you are familiar with that. And actually, that union had that company bankrupt, but it was sold off. And the union wouldn't make capitulations to the company, and as a result, the company filed Chapter 11. They went out of business. However, a new company purchased them, and then the unions agreed to the things that those companies were asking them to do, which were in effect the same things that the previous owner had asked, but they just had such a bad relationship. There's also some other things happening where unions are looking at investments that the companies are making on pensions, and they're actually becoming, they have shareholders, and they can go to a lot of different companies' shareholder meetings, and as such have been able to disrupt some other things and force investments and decisions, and put pressure on those boards, and so there are lots of different things can happen. And so the basic aspect of being without interference shows that the benefits of doing so. And then also looking at Trader Joe's, what struck me there, I wasn't familiar with this particular case, so that's one of the fun things. We learn a lot ourselves as we go through the course. But one person filing an unfair labor practice with the board is kind of interesting, because you really can't file that as an individual. So I'll have to go read some of the behind the stories with that. But it also points out that if this kind of complaint was probably better represented in the EEOC arena, and the person had rights to file there. But you're going to find out as we move forward in the course that also there's some social media things that are happening that would also maybe fall under some employment law and anti-discrimination things that would happen, but people are choosing to go under the National Labor Relations Board, and the board is hearing them. So it's going to be interesting to see that. And then I saw also the Chicago teachers strike, and early on in my career, I actually negotiated with the New York State United Teachers Union that was part and affiliated with the American Federation of Teachers. And we had a good relationship with that union as well. And it reminded me of something that we look at, that some of the issues that were present that employers were actually responsible for back in, believe it or not, the 70s and 80s, when things were going really well. The union would be asking for demands for increased salaries and other accommodations on various benefits, and the employers were giving them like hand over fist. And then that all changed in the late 80s when we went into a recession, and then there were givebacks where the company was sitting down with the union asking for those things to be given back, and those were difficult times. And I sat, believe it or not, in those negotiations where we were asking for things back from our unions, and we were getting those as well. And so today, looking at the give and take and the situation that is occurring there, and so there needs to be some balance as well. So again, good discussions that you had throughout. And one of the questions that I asked got sort of lost a little bit was, should there be some labor law reform? And so carry that on over into this week's discussion when we ask, what is the right thing to do with this case study, and then some key learnings as a result of that. So just a reminder, I have virtual office hours. We're a small, tight class. So as we continue to motor along, building on the foundation of the National Labor Relations Act, we're not going to deviate probably far from that. You're going to see where it intersects in a variety of different things as we move forward, especially talking about collective bargaining and negotiations and other aspects. So with that, I look forward to reading your reflections too on yes or no decisions. And just in that regard, we're continuing to pray that God would amaze you this semester in some fashion. Whatever you need done in your life, a breakthrough personally, professionally, or spiritually. So with that, I'll see you in the virtual classroom this week. God bless you.